The Hollow's Call the letter arrived on a Tuesday, yellowed at the edges and smelling of old wood and something else, something that made Sarah's stomach turn. Her great-aunt Meredith, a woman she'd met only once as a child, had left her a cabin deep in the West Virginia mountains. Cabin was generous. The photographs showed a structure that seemed to lean into the hillside, like it was trying to hide. Weathered clapboard siding, a tin roof green with moss, and windows that reflected nothing but darkness even in daylight. Sarah's mother had warned her about that side of the family. "Mountain folk," she'd whispered, as if the words themselves carried a curse. "They got ways about them that ain't natural." But Sarah needed the escape. The divorce had been brutal, her ex-husband taking everything, including her sense of self. A free cabin in the mountains seemed like Providence, even if it came with family baggage. The drive up the winding mountain road took 3 hours longer than expected. Her GPS lost signal after the first hour, leaving her to navigate by handwritten directions that seemed to lead deeper into wilderness with each turn. The trees grew thicker, older, their branches forming a canopy so dense that afternoon felt like twilight. When she finally found the turnoff, a dirt path barely wide enough for her Honda, the sun was setting behind the ridgeline. The cabin sat in a clearing that felt wrong somehow, as if the trees had been convinced to step back rather than cut down. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old wood and something medicinal, herbs, maybe, or roots. Mason jars lined the kitchen shelves, filled with things that didn't look like food. Some contained what looked like dried flowers. Others held murky liquids that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. The bedroom was sparse. An iron bed frame, a chest of drawers, and a mirror so old its silver backing had worn away in patches, creating dark spots that looked like watching eyes. That first night, Sarah lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to sounds she couldn't identify. Not just the usual mountain noises, wind through trees, settling wood, distant owl calls. These were different, rhythmic, almost like chanting, but so faint she couldn't be sure it wasn't just her imagination. She met Ezra the next morning. He appeared at her door, like he'd materialized from the morning mist, a tall man with skin like old leather and eyes the color of winter sky. "You'd be Meredith's kin," he said. It wasn't a question. "Sarah, her great-niece." Ezra nodded slowly, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to step back. "You got the look of her." "That's unfortunate." "Excuse me." Meredith had the sight, could see things others couldn't, feel things others shouldn't. He gestured toward the hollow that stretched behind the cabin, where the trees grew so thick the ground disappeared into shadow. "That hollow's been calling to your family for generations." Meredith, she knew how to keep it quiet. "Question is, do you?" Sarah forced a laugh. "I don't believe in that kind of thing." Ezra's expression didn't change. "Belief ain't required. The hollow don't care what you think about it." He turned to leave, then paused. "Word of advice, don't go walking in them woods after dark. And if you hear singing, don't listen too close. Some songs ain't meant for living ears." After he left, Sarah tried to shake off the encounter. Mountain folk and their superstitions, she told herself. But as the day wore on, she found herself glancing toward the hollow more and more often. There was something about it that drew the eye, even when she tried to focus on other things. That afternoon, while cleaning out the cabin, she found Meredith's journal. The entries started normal enough, weather observations, notes about her garden, complaints about arthritis. But as Sarah read deeper, the tone changed. June 15th, they're getting stronger. The voices from the hollow. Mama's remedies ain't holding like they used to. June 23rd, found another circle of stones this morning, closer to the house than ever before. Had to burn sage all day to keep the whispers quiet. July 4th, it knows I'm weakening. Can feel it testing the boundaries, pushing against the protections. God help whoever comes after me. The final entry was dated just a week before Meredith's death. They showed me what's coming. What's been waiting in that hollow since before the Cherokee walked these mountains. It's patient, but it's hungry. And it's been calling to our blood for too long to give up now. That night, Sarah heard the singing. It started just after midnight, so faint she thought it might be wind through the trees. But as she lay listening, she realized that its structure, melody, rhythm, words in a language she didn't recognize but somehow understood. Come down to the hollow deep, where the old ones wake and the new ones sleep. Come down where the shadows play, and the night consumes the dying day. She found herself sitting up in bed, then standing, then walking toward the window. The hollow stretched before her, no longer just dark, but glowing with a soft, sickly light that seemed to pulse in time with the singing. Shapes moved between the trees. Tall, impossibly thin figures that swayed like kelp in an ocean current. As she watched, one of them turned toward the cabin, and she saw its face, or the absence of one. Where features should have been was only smooth, pale skin stretched over bone. Sarah jerked back from the window, heart hammering. When she looked again, the hollow was dark and silent. But the singing continued inside her head. The next morning brought no relief. The melody followed her as she tried to go about normal tasks, making coffee, checking her phone, reading. Every time she thought it had faded, it would return a little louder, a little clearer. She drove into town, desperate for human contact and cell service. The general store was a relic from another era, all creaking floorboards and shelves stocked with things that looked like they'd been there since the 1950s. The clerk, a woman about Sarah's age with prematurely gray hair, looked up when she entered. "You're staying in Meredith's place. How did you? Word travels fast up here. I'm Beth." She studied Sarah with the same intensity Ezra had shown. "How you sleeping?" "Fine, Zara liegt." Beth's expression said she knew better. Meredith used to come in here every few weeks, buying sage and salt and other things. Said it was for keeping the garden healthy, but we all knew better. "What do you mean?" Beth glanced around the empty store, then leaned closer. "That hollow behind your place, it's old. Older than the Cherokee, older than anyone remembers. My grandmother used to tell stories about it. Said it was a thin place where things from the other side could push through. Other side of what? Death. Sleep. Whatever you want to call the place where things go when they ain't supposed to be here anymore." Beth straightened up as another customer entered. "Meredith kept it quiet for 40 years. Question is, can you?" Sarah spent the afternoon researching the area's history at the tiny local library. What she found made her blood run cold. The hollow had a name, Whispering Gap, and it had a history of disappearances stretching back to the earliest European settlements. Entire families had vanished overnight, leaving behind only empty cabins and strange symbols carved into trees. The Cherokee had avoided the area, calling it the place where the dead dream. Early settlers had tried to build there multiple times, but their communities never lasted more than a few years before being abandoned. The pattern was always the same. People would report hearing singing at night, seeing figures in the woods, feeling drawn to walk into the hollow after dark. Then they would disappear, leaving behind only their belongings and, sometimes, journals filled with increasingly erratic entries about voices calling their names. Meredith's family had been the guardians, the ones who kept whatever lived in the hollow contained. Generation after generation, they'd maintained the barriers, both physical and spiritual, that kept the ancient hunger at bay. But now Meredith was dead, and Sarah was alone with something that had been waiting decades for this moment. That night, the singing was louder, more insistent. Sarah tried everything, earplugs, music, even sleeping pills she'd found in Meredith's medicine cabinet. Nothing worked. The melody seemed to come from inside her bones, vibrating through her skeleton like a tuning fork. Around 3 a.m., She gave up trying to sleep and went to the kitchen for water. That's when she saw them. Footprints in the dust on the cabin floor. Bare feet, impossibly long and narrow, leading from the front door to the bedroom where she'd been lying. The prints were still warm to the touch. Sarah grabbed a flashlight and checked every room, every closet, every corner where something might hide. The cabin was empty, but the footprints remained, and now she could see more of them, dozens of sets, all leading toward the bedroom, as if a crowd of the things had been standing around her bed while she slept. The next morning, Ezra returned. He took one look at Sarah's face and shook his head. "It started, hasn't it?" Sarah nodded, too exhausted to pretend otherwise. "How long you been hearing the singing?" 3 nights. Then we ain't got much time." He stepped past her into the cabin, moving with the confidence of someone who'd been there before. "Meredith should have prepared you, but I reckon she thought she had more time." "Prepare me for what?" Ezra was examining the footprints, his expression grim. "Your family's been bound to this place for over a century. Your great-great-grandmother, she made a deal with what lives in that hollow. Protection for the mountain folk in exchange for service." "What kind of service?" "The kind that keeps ancient hungers fed." He looked up at her, and she saw pity in his winter blue eyes. "Every generation, one of your blood has to tend the hollow. Keep the barriers strong, make the offerings, and when the time comes." "When the time comes, what?" "When the time comes, you feed it yourself." Sarah felt the world tilt around her. "That's insane. You're talking about human sacrifice. I'm talking about survival. That thing in the hollow, it's older than Christianity, older than any religion you'd recognize. It feeds on life force, on the essence of living things. Your family's been feeding it small things for generations. Animals, mostly, sometimes drifters who wouldn't be missed. But every few decades, it needs something more substantial. Meredith held it off longer than most. She was strong, had the sight real powerful. But in the end, it claimed her too." Ezra moved to the window, staring out at the hollow. "Thing is, it's been waiting for you specifically. The bloodline's getting thin, and you might be the last. Then I'll leave. I'll go back to the city and never come back." Ezra shook his head. "Too late for that. It's tasted you now, got your scent. It'll follow you wherever you go, and it'll be angry. Better to face it here, where the barriers are strongest." That night, Ezra helped Sarah prepare. They gathered materials from Meredith's hidden stores: salt, iron filings, herbs that had no names in English, and other things Sarah didn't want to identify. "The ritual has to be done at the heart of the hollow," Ezra explained as they worked. "There's a clearing about half a mile in, with a circle of standing stones. Cherokee didn't put them there, they're older. Much older. And then what? Then you make the choice. Feed it what it wants, or try to bind it for another generation. What does it want?" Ezra's hands stilled on the bundle of herbs he was tying. "You, Sarah. It wants you. Has been calling to your bloodline for over 100 years, waiting for the right moment, the right person. Meredith was strong enough to hold it back, but she's gone now, and it's hungry." As midnight approached, they made their way into the hollow. The singing started as soon as they crossed the tree line, but now Sarah could understand every word. Come home, daughter of the mountain. Come drink from the shadow fountain. Come home, your time has come to join the chorus, to be as one." The trees seemed to lean in around them as they walked, branches reaching like grasping fingers. The path, if it could be called that, wound deeper into the hollow, always descending, always leading towards something that waited in the dark. The clearing, when they reached it, was exactly as Ezra had described. 7 standing stones arranged in a perfect circle, each one carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. In the center of the circle, the ground was bare and stained dark with things Sarah didn't want to think about. The singing stopped. In the sudden silence, Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, Ezra's labored breathing, and something else, a sound like wind through dry leaves, but there was no wind. "It's here," Ezra whispered. The shadows between the stones began to move, coalescing into shapes that were almost human, but wrong in ways that made Sarah's mind recoil. Tall, impossibly thin figures with too many joints, faces that were smooth expanses of pale skin, and eyes like holes in the world. One of them stepped forward, and when it spoke, its voice was the sound of autumn leaves falling, of winter wind through bare branches, of things dying in the dark. "Daughter of the blood," it said, "you have come home at last." "I'm not giving myself to you," Sarah said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. The thing that might have been smiling if it had a mouth. "You misunderstand. We do not wish to destroy you. We wish to welcome you, to make you one of us. What's the difference? Death is an ending. What we offer is continuation. Your ancestor understood this when she made the pact. In exchange for our protection of these mountains, your bloodline would serve as our anchor to this world." Around the circle, more figures emerged from the shadows. Dozens of them, all tall and wrong and hungry. Every generation, one of her blood joins us willingly. They become our voice in the world of the living, our hand to tend the barriers, our eyes to watch for threats. Meredith served for 40 years before her body grew too weak to contain us. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "You're saying Meredith was possessed, shared. We shared her flesh, her thoughts, her dreams. In return, she lived far longer than any human should, saw things no mortal eyes should see, knew secrets that would drive lesser minds to madness." Ezra stepped closer to Sarah, his hand on the iron knife at his belt. "Don't listen to it. It's lying." The thing turned its eyeless gaze on him. "Are we, old man? Tell her what happened to her great-grandmother. Tell her about the night she walked into these woods and never came out, except she didn't she? She came back changed, different but still herself. Still loving her family, still protecting them. That wasn't her anymore," Ezra said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It was her. Enhanced, improved, made eternal." The creature's attention returned to Sarah. "We do not steal. We do not destroy. We transform. We make perfect." Sarah looked around the circle at the waiting figures. In the moonlight, she could see that some of them still wore the remnants of clothing, old-fashioned dresses, work shirts, overalls. People who had made this choice before her. What if I refuse? Then the pact is broken. The barriers fall, and we are free to walk in the world of the living as we once did before your ancestor bound us to this place. The thing's voice carried the weight of centuries. How many will die in the cities below when we hunt as we once hunted? How many children will vanish in the night? How many families will be consumed by shadows that should not exist? Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of generations pressing down on her. Her great-great-grandmother had made this choice to protect others. Meredith had carried the burden for 40 years. Now it was her turn. "If I agree," she said slowly, "what happens to me? To who I am? You remain yourself, but you become more. You will see as we see, know as we know. The loneliness that has plagued your kind will end. You will never be alone again. And you will have purpose beyond anything your mortal life could offer." Sarah opened her eyes and looked at Ezra, who was watching her with something like resignation in his eyes. "There's no other way." He shook his head slowly. "I've been thinking about it for 40 years, ever since I helped Meredith through her transformation. There's always a choice, but the consequences." He gestured toward the hollow around them. "This thing, it's patient, but it's also hungry. And it's been contained here for over a century. If it gets loose..." Sarah nodded, understanding. She stepped toward the center of the circle. "I accept," she said. The change began immediately. It started as a tingling in her fingertips, like static electricity, but quickly spread up her arms and through her chest. The world around her began to shift. colors becoming more vivid, shadows gaining depth and meaning. She could suddenly see the threads of energy that connected all living things, the slow, steady pulse of the trees, the quick flutter of small animals hiding in the underbrush, the ancient, deep thrumming of the earth itself. But more than that, she could see the hollow for what it truly was. Not just a place, but a wound in reality, a thin spot where other worlds press close to this one. And through that wound, things have been seeping through for millennia, not evil exactly, but alien, hungry, desperate to exist in a world that wasn't meant for them. Her great-great-grandmother hadn't made a deal with demons. She'd made a deal with refugees. "We came here fleeing something worse," the lead figure explained. And now Sarah could hear the sadness in its voice, the exhaustion of eons spent hiding. Our world was dying, consumed by something that devours realities like a man might eat fruit. We found this crack, this small tear between worlds, and we squeezed through. "But you couldn't survive here alone," Sarah said, understanding flooding through her transformed consciousness. "We are beings of thought and shadow. We need flesh to anchor us, minds to think through, hearts to feel with. Without your family's willing partnership, we would have faded away centuries ago." The transformation was accelerating now. Sarah could feel her consciousness expanding, touching the minds of the creatures around her. They weren't monsters. They were the last survivors of a dead universe, clinging to existence through symbiosis with her bloodline. As the merger completed, Sarah's awareness exploded outward. She could suddenly perceive the entire mountain range, feel every living thing within miles, but more importantly, she could see the barriers her family had maintained, not just physical protections, but psychic ones, keeping the refugees contained and hidden from a world that would never understand them. "Meredith," she whispered, and suddenly her great-aunt was there, not physically, but as a presence in her mind. "Welcome home, child," Meredith's voice echoed in her thoughts. "I'm sorry I couldn't prepare you better, but some things can only be learned through experience. You're still here. We all are. Every guardian who came before, every member of our family who made this choice. We're part of something larger now, something that spans generations and worlds." Sarah could feel them, her great-grandmother, her great-great-grandmother, and others stretching back through time. All of them still present, still themselves, but connected to something vast and ancient and desperately lonely. "The disappearances," Sarah said aloud. "The people who vanished over the years. Volunteers," Meredith's presence explained. "People who were dying anyway, or who had nothing left to live for. We gave them a choice: fade away into nothing, or become part of something eternal. Most chose to join us. And the others? The ones who refused were allowed to leave. We never took anyone against their will. But the stories grew in the telling, as stories do. Fear spreads faster than truth." Over the following weeks, Sarah learned to navigate her new existence. During the day, she appeared mostly human, though her senses were far sharper and she could perceive things that had always been hidden from mortal eyes. At night, she walked the hollow with her new family, tending the barriers, maintaining the ancient agreements that kept both worlds safe. The refugees taught her their history, how their universe had been consumed by something they called the Devourer, a force of pure entropy that ate realities like cancer. They were the last survivors of billions of worlds, and this small hollow in the Appalachian Mountains was their final sanctuary. "But you're not just hiding," Sarah realized during one of their nightly gatherings. "You're preparing for something." The eldest of them, a being so ancient it had no individual identity left, communicated through images and emotions rather than words. It showed her visions of the Devourer, still hunting across the infinite expanse of the multiverse, still consuming world after world in its endless hunger. It will find this reality eventually, the Ancient One conveyed. When it does, we must be ready. Ready how? To fight. To protect this world as we could not protect our own. Your people, your reality, is precious beyond measure. We will not let it fall. Sarah understood then why her family had been chosen, not just as anchors or hosts, but as bridges between worlds, translators who could help two vastly different forms of life work together toward a common goal. As autumn deepened into winter, Sarah began to understand the full scope of her new responsibilities. The Hollow wasn't just a hiding place. It was a watchtower, one of many scattered across the world, each one guarded by families like hers who had made similar 2 years after Sarah's transformation. The world began to change in ways that couldn't be ignored. Strange phenomena were being reported across the globe, unexplained lights in remote areas, entire towns experiencing shared nightmares, and an increasing number of people claiming to hear voices calling them to specific locations. Sarah felt it through the network. Other watchtowers were activating, some that had been dormant for decades. The refugees weren't just hiding anymore. They were preparing for something massive. It's accelerating, Marcus reported during one of their monthly gatherings. His Louisiana watchtower had grown from a single guardian to a team of 12, including marine biologists who were documenting strange changes in the Gulf waters. The barriers between worlds are thinning everywhere. Elena nodded grimly. Same in New Mexico. We're picking up energy readings that don't match anything in known physics. And the dreams. She shuddered. People for hundreds of miles around are having the same nightmare. Something vast and hungry moving between the stars. Sarah felt the ancient presence in her mind stir with recognition and fear. The devourer. After eons of searching, it had finally caught the scent of their refuge. "How long do we have?" she asked. The eldest refugee's response came as a flood of images, cosmic distances collapsing, realities being consumed like paper in a fire, and always the approaching darkness that devoured everything in its path. Months, perhaps a year at most. It moves faster now, having learned to navigate the spaces between worlds more efficiently. The decision to reveal themselves came not from the Guardians, but from the refugees themselves. During a gathering in the Hollow, the Ancient Ones shared a vision that changed everything. Sarah saw it through their collective consciousness. The Devourer wasn't just a force of destruction. It was intelligent, calculating, and it had been using the consumed realities to grow stronger. Every world it devoured added to its knowledge, its power, its ability to find and destroy the remaining pockets of existence. "We cannot hide anymore," the eldest communicated. "Your species must know what is coming. They must be given the choice to fight or to flee." "They'll panic," David warned. "Governments will try to weaponize you. Religions will call you demons, and the general population will lose their minds." "Perhaps, but the alternative is extinction for both our peoples." Sarah felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. As the primary guardian of the oldest watchtower, the choice fell to her. "We start small," she decided. "Selected individuals first, scientists, military leaders, people who can handle the truth and help prepare others." Dr. Rebecca Chun was a theoretical physicist at MIT, specializing in parallel universe theory. She'd been having the dreams for months, visions of impossible geometries and voices speaking in mathematical equations. When Sarah appeared at her office on a Tuesday afternoon, Dr. Chun wasn't entirely surprised. "You're here about the dreams," she said before Sarah could speak. "Among other things." Sarah closed the office door and activated the small device Elena had created, a refugee technology that would prevent any recording equipment from functioning. "Dr. Chun, how familiar are you with the concept of multiversal refugees?" The conversation that followed lasted 6 hours. Sarah showed Dr. Chun evidence that challenged everything she thought she knew about physics, reality, and humanity's place in the cosmos. By the end, The physicist was pale but determined. "What do you need from me? Help us prepare your people for what's coming, and help us figure out how to fight something that eats realities." Dr. Chun became the first official human refugee liaison, using her connections in the scientific community to quietly assemble a team of researchers who could handle the truth. Within months, they had a network of physicists, astronomers, and military strategists working on the problem. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Dr. Chen's teenage daughter, Amy, who had inherited her mother's mathematical genius but approached problems with the fearless creativity of youth. "What if we don't try to fight it directly?" Amy suggested during one of the research sessions. "What if we make ourselves indigestible?" The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "Explain," Sarah said. Amy pulled up her holographic models, refugee technology integrated with human computers to create visualizations impossible with either alone. The devourer consumes realities by breaking them down into component parts, right? But what if we could create a reality that actively resists breakdown? Something that gets stronger when attacked. The eldest refugee's presence stirred with interest. "Show us." Amy's fingers flew over the interface, building a theoretical model of a reality that fed on the very forces the devourer used to destroy worlds. "It's like creating an immune system for the universe itself. Instead of hiding from the infection, we become the cure." The plan that emerged from Amy's insight was audacious beyond imagination. Instead of trying to hide Earth from the devourer, they would transform it into something the entity couldn't consume, a reality so integrated with refugee consciousness that destroying it would be like trying to digest a living immune system. It would require the voluntary participation of millions of humans, each one forming a symbiotic bond with refugee consciousness. Not the deep merger that Guardians experienced, but a lighter touch, shared awareness, enhanced perception, and the ability to perceive and manipulate the fundamental forces that held reality together. "It's never been attempted on this scale," Meredith's presence warned during one of Sarah's meditative sessions. "The risk of losing what makes humanity human is enormous." "The risk of extinction is greater," Sarah replied. "And maybe it's time for both our species to become something new." The first volunteers came from the families of existing Guardians, people who had already been exposed to the truth and had time to process it. The transformation was gentler than what Sarah had experienced, more like gaining a new sense than losing an old identity. But the results were remarkable. The volunteers could perceive dimensional stress points, manipulate probability fields, and most importantly, they could strengthen the barriers between worlds simply by existing. As word spread through carefully managed channels, the response was everything they had feared and hoped for. Some governments tried to capture and study the refugees. Some religious groups declared them demons. Some people fled to remote areas, hoping to avoid the contamination. But others embraced the change. Artists found their creativity exploded as they gained access to aesthetic concepts from dead universes. Scientists made breakthrough discoveries by thinking with minds that had evolved under different physical laws. Philosophers grappled with questions of identity and consciousness that had never been relevant before. The transformation wasn't mandatory, but it was contagious in the best possible way. As more people experienced the expanded awareness, they became advocates for the change, helping others overcome their fears and prejudices. Sarah found herself at the center of a movement that was reshaping not just human consciousness, but the fundamental nature of reality itself. The barriers between worlds weren't just being maintained, they were being rewoven into something stronger, more flexible, more alive. When the Devourer finally arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system, it found something unprecedented, a reality that fought back. Sarah felt its presence like a cold wind across her expanded consciousness. Through the network of transformed humans and refugee allies, She could perceive the entity in all its terrible glory. It was vast beyond comprehension, a living void that had consumed billions of worlds, each one adding to its hunger and intelligence. But as it reached out to begin the familiar process of breaking down reality's defenses, something unexpected happened. The barriers didn't crumble, they adapted, flowing around the Devourer's attacks like water around stone. Impossible, the entity's voice echoed across dimensions, carrying the weight of eons and the fury of frustrated hunger. No reality has ever resisted the consumption. This one does, Sarah replied, her voice carried by millions of transformed humans and refugees working in perfect harmony. Because this one is alive. The conflict that followed couldn't be described in terms of traditional warfare. It was a battle fought on levels of existence that had no names, using weapons made of pure concept and shields woven from the dreams of two species working as one. The Devourer attacked with the accumulated knowledge of every world it had consumed, throwing the death screams of entire realities against Earth's defenses. But each attack was absorbed, analyzed, and transformed into something that made the defender stronger. Amy Chun, now 18 and serving as one of the primary tactical coordinators, watched the battle unfold through instruments that existed partially in 17 different dimensions. "It's learning," she reported, "adapting its attacks to match our defenses." "Then we adapt faster," Sarah replied. Through the network, she could feel the collective intelligence of humanity and the refugees working together, processing information and developing countermeasures at speeds that would have been impossible for either species alone. The battle raged for days that felt like years, reality itself bending and flexing under the strain. But gradually, something unprecedented began to happen. The Devourer, for the first time in its existence, began to weaken. As the conflict continued, Sarah began to understand something that changed everything. The Devourer wasn't evil, it was starving. It had been consuming realities not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to exist, to maintain its consciousness across the vast emptiness between worlds. "It's like us," she realized, sharing the insight through the network. A refugee from something even worse. Through the connection forged by battle, she reached out to the entity's consciousness, offering not destruction, but understanding. What she found there was ancient beyond measure, a being that had once been part of a reality so vast and complex that its destruction had driven the survivor mad with grief and hunger. "You offer symbiosis?" The Devourer's voice carried surprise and something that might have been hope. "We offer family," Sarah replied. "A place to belong, a purpose beyond consumption." The transformation that followed was visible from space. Reality itself seemed to exhale as the Devourer's hunger was finally satisfied not by destruction, but by connection. The entity's vast consciousness began to integrate with the human refugee network, adding its eons of knowledge and experience to their collective understanding. 5 years after the Devourer's arrival, Earth had become something unprecedented in the history of the multiverse, a reality that actively protected other realities, a beacon of hope for refugees from dying worlds, and a fortress against the forces of entropy that threatened all existence. Sarah stood in the hollow where it all began, but the space had transformed beyond recognition. What had once been a small clearing in the Appalachian Mountains was now a nexus point where representatives from dozens of realities could meet and collaborate. The refugees were no longer hiding. They worked openly alongside humans, their combined knowledge leading to advances in science, art, and philosophy that would have taken millennia to achieve alone. The Devourer, now calling itself the Gardener, used its vast power to nurture new realities and protect existing ones from the entropic forces that had once driven it to consume. Do you ever miss it? Meredith's presence asked during one of their evening conversations. Being just human, Sarah considered the question, feeling the vast network of consciousness that now surrounded and supported her. She could perceive 17 dimensions simultaneously, communicate with beings made of pure mathematics, and help maintain the barriers that protected countless worlds from destruction. I miss the simplicity sometimes, she admitted, but I wouldn't trade what we've become for what we were. We're not just human anymore, and we're not just refugees. We're something new, something that can protect all the realities that might yet be born. As night fell over the mountains, Sarah felt the presence of millions of minds working together. Human creativity merged with refugee wisdom, guided by the gardener's ancient knowledge and protected by barriers woven from the dreams of two species that had chosen cooperation over conquest. The hollow still sang at night, but now it was joined by voices from across the multiverse, a chorus of hope that echoed through dimensions, calling to other refugees, other guardians, other realities that might need sanctuary in a vast darkness between worlds. And in the depths of the Appalachian Mountains, where an old woman's journal had once recorded her fears about voices in the dark, a new chapter in the history of existence was being written, one word, one choice, one transformed life at a time. The story had no ending because it was no longer just a story. It had become reality itself, ever-growing, ever-changing, ever-reaching toward a future where no world would have to face the darkness alone. Make sure to like and subscribe for more stories.